All right, everybody, welcome tonight to PEP Talk, the Maryland Forward Party. My name is Matt Byers, and I have with me
Tanya Sweat and
Pete Oliver Kruger.
And this will be the last episode in our initial series. So far, you have only heard from the leaders of the Maryland Forward Party. In our next series, we want to introduce you to an open pep talk that we held with the general public. But before we do that, let's take a look at the last epic problem that made it onto the list. And then we'll wrap things up with a feedback session that we held afterwards. But for those who are joining us for the first time, here is a quick 1-minute recap of the rules of a pep talk. PEP stands for Prioritized Epic Problems, and it's an alternative way to have a debate. Instead of fighting about how we're going to solve our problems, we first go back and have a debate about what problems should we solve in the first place. So the number one rule of a pep talk is no solutions. Rule number 2 is that everybody gets 1 minute and then we go on to the next person. That way more people get a chance to talk. Because the collaboration is what is really important. And rule 3 is to put the problems in order. Because when we solve problems one at a time, we usually end up creating new problems or make other problems worse. The order tells us which problems we should not make worse when trying to solve another problem. Now, if you joined us for the previous episodes, you may remember that the prompt question that we gave ourselves was, what problems would make us as leaders consider leaving the Forward Party if they were not addressed? We collected problems from the community and from among ourselves and put them in order so that we could determine which problems we should not make worse. So check out this debate about the last problem that got added to our initial list, and we'll see you on the other side.
David, you're up next.
Okay, I'm going to propose a new one. Disintegration of Principles. If Forward Party were to modify their legislative principles for the sake of a perceived short-term gain. So the example I gave was a big money donor comes in and offers to give us $25 million, but only if Forward remove the open nonpartisan primaries principle. It probably happens a lot in politics where we're going to give you money, but you have to bend your principles a little bit. So when I describe what the party's about, usually I say it's for voting reforms, open nonpartisan primaries, and independent redistricting commissions. So if we were to toss one of those for the sake of winning a local election or whatnot, then that would perhaps make me leave the party.
I have a clarifying question, just a thing. Does this apply, in your opinion, to like if they were to have a vote or go through and decide that they were going to remove that from our list of principles? Would that be a separate issue for you?
You mean, would it be okay for me if everyone agreed that we were going to get rid of nonpartisan primaries?
Yeah, if they went through a process, like I'm clarifying that this is about doing it for short-term gain, but in the long term, if they went through a formal process, they reconsidered and they decided to pull one of those things out and make an adjustment, is that in the same category for you?
Yeah, to me, it's all grouped together. I would think it's kind of a slippery slope that you get rid of one of your principles and then next year someone else comes around with a big cash pile of money and then you decide to get rid of voting reforms, if I'm answering your question correctly.
If I can clarify Pete's question,
Yeah.
I think Pete's asking if every forwardist in the country were to vote on removing one of the principles and they decided to do it, regardless, leaving the money out, would you still leave the party?
That'd be a judgment call. I don't know.
Any other clarifying questions? Yes, Brandon.
Dave, does that mean if it's a judgment call for you, then you want to leave the language as it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Does anybody want to open this up for debate? I do. Debate stage. All right. Suggestion. To say it in a slightly longer way, I think it's about ratification. So my suggestion on a change would be that if the Forward Party were to modify their legislative principles without ratifying it with the membership, but I think that is more of the situation here, that if the leadership is doing something, wherever for the sake of it is, but they're doing it on their own without the membership.
Okay, yeah, I'm good with that. There has to be a process in place to be able to change the principles.
You could say without ratification by the membership.
Do you like that as well, David?
Yep.
Any other suggestions, changes, modifications?
I do have one, but it's pedantic. We've referred to forward and forward party throughout these. We're not consistent.
Well, you got 2 forwards, 2 forward parties, and 1 national forward.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
Do you want to modify yours, David?
Yeah, in general, we can say national forward party.
All right, PJ.
We got rid of the part of short-term gain. My initial question for David was that needed? I don't think it was needed necessarily, but I want to confirm that it's okay with Dave.
No, it's fine. It's not needed.
Okay, cool.
I also realized that, point of order, I forgot to ask for your position. So, David, where do you want to position disintegration of principles?
Well, for myself, it'd be close to the top because, like I said, when I think of the party, that's what I think of. Those 3 things. People ask me what your platform is, and we say, well, we really don't have a platform. We have these 3 principles, legislative principles, and we have these values.
Well, you can put it wherever you wish.
I put it below separation of church and state.
Okay. Tanya is up next.
Yes, quick question. I like the ratification by members. Just, I guess, curious as to how that would happen. Would that necessarily need to be a state by state thing? Or would it just be, hey, we're having a national convention and we need to address this kind of a situation?
Are you asking what the current policy is of changing national?
Yeah, that might be helpful. But that might clarify for me.
Yeah, I don't know what the national policy is on setting in principles, if there is one.
I do not think there is one right now.
So I guess my clarification would be, what is your position on that, kind sir?
I would say there would have to be a national vote by all members to ratify it.
So do you want to change it to modify their legislative principles without ratification through national vote by the membership?
Yeah, that works.
I would propose that you move it below disenfranchisement. And my reasoning for that is that if it becomes the legislative principle that we are willing to disenfranchise people, then disenfranchisement takes a back seat.
Okay. Yeah, good point. You can move it.
Okay, PJ, you're up.
When we went through and we changed everything to national forward party, I think some of these, the ones that we changed to national party, I think there would be concerns if some of these happen at the state level as well, not just the national party. And it might need to revisit.
Good point. Can we take that up in the future?
Yeah, just wanted to mention it.
All right. I'm up again because I am comparing them between the two. And if the national decided to adopt a principle of dictating policy, is that okay with you?
No.
All right. So do you want to move it down?
Okay. I could sense I'm working my way to the bottom.
Well, he's just trying to do the problems in the right order so that he can't make a higher order problem worse.
Right.
Exactly. All right. So I'm going to do it one more time.
What was the bring in dangerous candidates who accept that as a principle? No. So go ahead and move it down.
Okay.
Thankfully, I can't go any lower.
That's where it was.
Well, we have 2 more people, so I still may know the bottom.
All right, PJ.
Moving it below dangerous candidates, like I feel like some of these principles help design or help guide the candidate pledge that's mentioned in number 4. So I feel like it should be above that one because we refer to the candidate pledge. Like it could impact values potentially.
You're thinking about it backwards, PJ, because you can't solve one and then make a higher order problem worse.
Okay. Got it.
That was the end of our window for original debate. Is there a motion to extend debate? Or shall we proceed to potential vote? Going once, going twice, 3 times. All right. Does somebody want to make a motion for a vote?
I'll motion for a vote and apologize to PJ. I should have said, I think you're thinking about it backwards as opposed to making a judgment on him.
No, I think you're probably right.
I second if I can second.
Yes, you can. All right. So, any objections to putting Disintegration of Principles and position 5? Going once, going twice, 3 times. Any abstentions? Going once, going twice. All right. By unanimous consent, it is on.
All right, so in this last section, we wrapped up by talking about the process itself and talking about some augmentations or adjustments that we wanted to make. And we used some of the same principles of the PEP Talk itself to talk about the PEP Talk. You know, what were some of the problems that we experienced and what are some of the improvements that we might want to make? So you actually get to see a little bit about how talking about problems and fleshing out the problems helps us to come up with better solutions and solutions that can solve multiple problems at once. And I love the fact that we took this opportunity to improve on the technique itself. And then we actually rolled out those improvements on the next quarter when we came back and did that, which we just did recently before the recording of this podcast.
Yeah, and I think what's really cool here is the hot wash concept. So after you get done with any sort of event, you all should sit down and talk about what went right, what went wrong, and what you could do better next time, that kind of thing. Some people call it roses, buds, and thorns. Some people call it hot wash. Some people, whatever.
Retrospective.
There's lots of different ways to say it, but it should be done.
Yeah.
And we did it. And what I thought was really cool about this is I know Pete's emotionally invested in PEP Talks, and he's been pushing this idea forever. But when we came back and we said, I think you need to change the process a little bit, he didn't throw up his hands and walk away and take his ball and go home.
Right.
He actually listened to us and appreciated the comments and incorporated them and said, oh yeah, that actually would work better. So.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Congratulations and thank you. I'd be curious to hear people's feedback. If you want to stick around and say so right now, you certainly may. If you want to ditch out of here and leave me feedback either personally by email or in Discord, then I'd love to know what you thought of the process and how it all went. But we are officially wrapped.
I want to say thank you to all the board members for staying around for this. I think it was longer than we all expected, but I think it was really worthwhile, and so I appreciate you all.
As do I.
I just had one question because we had a few items in the logbook that we didn't get to this evening. So will we do a follow-up session like soon, or how soon, shall I say, do we anticipate going back to this and looking at it again?
The general thought is to do it quarterly. If we feel like we did not get through enough and we need another session before we hit the end of the next quarter, we can certainly put that motion in to set up another session. Otherwise, we'll come back in a quarter and we can tackle these again.
And when we come back in the next quarter, will we be picking up kind of where we left off here or leave off here tonight? Or
that is definitely the intention. This is now officially into the record for our proceedings as to our list of prioritized problems, and any actions in the future would be modifications against this list.
Awesome. Thanks. This was an awesome exercise. I appreciate it.
We can have this chat now, as part of the conversation or not, but I think we all can have a PEP Talk officially because we are registered, or we are elected and voted on representatives of the organization. And so if we vote on something, there's some, we are elected leaders of the board, and there's a lot to say that is part of our formal list. What we held last night only involved 3 people who showed up.
It's true.
And so it'd be really hard to then prioritize everything that we do based on 3 people who just happened to show up that night. Right. And the other part that I was thinking of is that, even though we're going to send out that survey and get people, hopefully from, the newsletter to read it and give us their own votes, we don't know if any of those people actually listened to the debate before they voted.
It's true.
And really the power of it is that participating and at least hearing the debate and then giving your own votes. So I think one thing we should do is an open leadership meeting in future quarters. And that anybody could, participate, and then the vote is of the leadership. And if leadership votes it in, it's officially on the list.
Okay. I can go along with that.
Dude, I thought this was great. I'm one to get to a quick answer and keep going. So, like, a process like this, I came into it, like, ready to do it, but wasn't quite sure what to expect. And the process made all these lines better than they started from. And these rounds of feedback and buy-in that we did along the way was just really impressive. And I think these are, like, some pretty powerful statements here. And commend the process itself. It was really, really great. Thanks.
Yeah, I think the process worked really well. The one observation I'll just point out is all of our statements that we've ended up with are if statements, as in if something were to happen, that would be a problem that we should address. I just think that's interesting.
But think about it for a second. The Constitution itself was written as a result of hypotheticals. How do we prevent a king? How do we give representation to the people and make it equal at the same time? So people asked these questions and as problems, and they came up with the Constitution in the end. But those were hypotheticals.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I think also in the structure of this is prioritized epic problems and is designed to be beyond just here and now.
Another way to look at it is a lot of these problems, if you will, indicate to me the reasons why we all joined forward. Because I didn't hear anybody say, I don't like any of these. And when I was going through the list, I agree with all of these. And I want to add one more thing because it's important to me. So I think this gives us an idea of why we're here. And then it lets us know what we need to do to retain the quality membership that we are beginning to grow.
I know for myself, if we have a good process and we have a good debate and somebody's able to change my mind, I will stick around if we have a good process. But if we don't have a good process and I don't trust the outcomes, then that would be what would make me leave.
Yeah, if we stopped doing these kind of town halls and said, no, we're never going to do something like Code Forward, like that'd be the problem.
Without interrupting anybody else, I have a suggestion for modification of the process. One thing I noticed, we didn't vote for it in the certain place that it was originally suggested that it would go off the table. We tied together the place and the problem. And I think for an initial problem, those two should be separated. There should be a vote that this is a problem, this is worded properly, and then there should be a separate vote that you place it within the ranking. I would hate to see a problem disappear off the list because people didn't want it in position 2, they wanted it in position 3.
Does anybody else have any thoughts about that?
So I totally agree with you there. Yeah, that's a great point. That happened with Mike's, right? I mean, it got tabled, but let's say someone suggests, I think it should go in 2, or the person who posed the problem said, I think it should go in 2. If that gets rejected, it just stays on the bottom of the list.
Right, it stays in the list, but it's on the bottom of the list.
Gotcha. So so it can either go in the placement that the person suggests or stays at the bottom. So could you argue that if someone posed the problem, it's technically already at the bottom of the list?
Not necessarily. You could win support to say, no, we shouldn't even be considering that problem.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Not only that, but how many of these 5 problems are worded exactly the way that we wrote them?
Well, right. I'm just, gosh, it is a conundrum because I completely agree with Matt. Like, to go through all that, debate the problem, get it written down, and then we don't agree on the slot placement, so it's off.
Seems like a bigger problem to you.
I mean, do you have to have the debate for the numbering? If you quickly say, like, if someone suggests, I think this is my new problem, I think it should go as number 1. If you have the vote, should it be on the list? And then you have a very quick vote right away, should it be number 1? Then a no, then it goes to the bottom. So there's not the debate for the or placement. You're just accepting or rejecting what the placement the person posed.
That's a good idea. And then somebody else could always move it later.
right? But it stays on the list based on the first vote. And then the second vote is no debate, just whether or not you accept the person's placement.
Ooh, I kind of like that. So if I can restate that from what I think I heard, which is that when we take the vote, we actually take 2 votes. So we debate both position and addition. And then at the end of the 10 minutes plus 5, optional 5, the vote is in 2 parts. Do you accept the problem to the list, and do you accept it in the position? And it can pass the first vote, but fail the second, in which case it goes to the end of the list. I can go ahead and make that change unless somebody else has some thoughts against doing a double vote at the end of each round.
If we're done with that thought for a sec, just a question. These 5 problems, where do we go from here? Like, what's kind of the next step with that?
I got a couple thoughts in my head. One, I want to run podcast and talk about some of these things and then bring in special guests, candidates, so they could come in and say, hey, I think that you're missing something from your list. Here's what I think it is. And here's why. And basically give like a little TED talk. I think that would be an engaging podcast. And then we could offer that up for, the community to give a non-binding vote after listening to the podcast. So that's one idea I have. Another one is that we could actually go back to something that Brandon told me. One of the groups that we were founding groups used to do scorecards for politicians. And now that we have a list of problems, we could take each of the politicians and see how well they do against each of these 5 problem statements. We could do that for any local candidates, and that could help us to provide a scorecard for people when they go to the poll.
Messages plus 198.
So we can use this as a prioritization for funding. We can use this as a prioritization for things like code forward. There's a lot of different things that we can base off of this stuff. This can help set our policies, and what we do depends on what we choose to do.
I like all those ideas, Pete, and I'd like to find a way to word them in a positive way.
I would push back a little bit because of the design of this stuff. As soon as we get into the positive language, we are starting to verge over into solution language. You can convince me otherwise. I mean, like I said, I always assume that there's probably something that I'm wrong about. But the way I've used this before, whenever they've tried to express these things as like challenges or goal statements or positive things, they've always fallen flat. Whereas when I work with teams and have them define clear problem statements in the negative, it inspires more action, which kind of hurts my soul a little bit because I am a very positive and optimistic person, but it works. So I go with the thing that works over the thing that I wish it was.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm just concerned about the age we live in with news, where people are doing sound bites. And so maybe it's not that it has to be positive, but it has to be proactive. Does that make sense?
Like guard against dangerous candidates.
Right, exactly.
I guess where I'm confused is that these aren't necessarily problems, they're hypothetical problems. But I'm kind of curious where you've worked with other organizations and prioritized problems this way, if they were hypothetical or they were more like actual, oh, this is a problem in our organization that we need to prioritize.
Well, in organizations, it's usually a practical problem that they are already experiencing, which is why it makes it onto the list. But I would also say, looking at this list, that we are practically right now dealing with dangerous candidates. We are also right now dealing with the separation of church and state. We are also right now dealing with disenfranchisement. We are also right now dealing with dictated policy stances. And we are also dealing with adopting principles without ratification. So I think we are actually dealing with all 5 of these things right now.
Okay, so then I think in another way that if we just rephrase it without the if, not necessarily as a positive statement, but because like we are dangerously close to, or certain people already want to align, I guess, with dangerous candidates. So,
but the question in the back of my mind is one that David raised, which is, what are we for? And we have to find a way to answer that question because people ask it all the time. We are for responsible candidates. We are for separation of church and state. We are for voter enfranchisement. We are for candidates being able to dictate their own policy stances. We are for national principles defined by ratification.
Here's what I would offer you as an alternative, that we develop 4 statements, but that it is a solution to these statements. So because we do not want to support a candidate in the election cycle that grossly violates the candidate pledge or is dishonest or democratic, therefore, we are choosing to do this policy statement. The minute change is that it opens up the door that we could choose a different policy and a different way forward that still solves the problems, and that we're acknowledging that there is not one way to solve this problem, but there could be multiple ways to solve this problem.
To emphasize that these are the problems and not the specific solution.
Here's the language I do with organizations. So I have them come back and offer up, like, you display the list of problems, and then the teams will pitch different projects saying, I think I can solve problem number 1, number 3, and number 4 by doing this. And then they go through and they adopt, different projects based upon which problems are getting solved. And they say, all right, so what we're going to do for the next year is we're going to run these 4 projects, because between these 4 projects, we solve all 5 of our problems. Let's test it out.
I'm amenable. All right, it is time for dinner.
I already started cooking my food while I was listening to you guys.
All right.
You got the "it's time for dinner" in there, huh?
I did. Even Siri. I got Siri because there was one piece that was important enough,
Christ.
and Siri was talking over it, so Siri gets to make a quick cameo.
God.
All right. Are we good for tonight?
I think we're good for tonight.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the PEP Talk Podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at maryland@forwardparty.com and let us know what you liked and what we can do better. And we'll see you again at a future episode of PEP Talk Podcast with the Maryland Forward Party.